Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Chippa in the third person video log. It is Wednesday, the 19th of June, 2019. Hoping today I get the information I need to unveil more about the Talkbuster podcast announcement, which I talked about in a little bit more detail on an earlier episode of this. But official dates and things like that, and exactly what's going to be going on, I'm waiting on until I get the official word from the other people involved. So hopefully that all comes to head today. Didn't get a chance to record a Talkbuster I had scheduled last night. I hope the guy that I was supposed to record with is okay. In his defense, I didn't follow up with him until yesterday at 3 in the afternoon. So I feel like kind of an idiot for not following up, but I still haven't heard back. So I'm hoping all is all right and we can get that rescheduled and get that episode recorded. I've got a couple more episodes queued up. This coming Monday, on Shooting the Shit with Chippa, is a recording with Andy Rodriguez, who is a Twitter follower, retweeter, discourse back and forth that I've been talking to on there for a long time, fan of my brother's and of mine. He answered my call to have some people on Shooting the Shit, and so we recorded an episode. That's coming Monday. It's great. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. I'm actually already planning on having him back on because we just had a great time and had so much to talk about. And then the following week is an episode of the Talkbuster podcast with Brett Klein, who worked in a lot of interesting stores and, moved up into corporate, back down into, the store management side. And he has a very unique tale of Blockbuster to tell. So be excited for that one. That's going to be great. What's going on with me this morning? So, on my way to work, as always, as usual, I saw this morning, shared by, I think it was comicbook.com, that Avengers Endgame is being re-released, I think this coming weekend or the following weekend, in advance to most likely help hype up Spider-Man Far From Home, including the fact that, the end of it has already been recut or added, the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, which is the first MCU movie post the events of Endgame, so that'll be very interesting to see anyway, outside of the fact that it looks really damn good, with Mysterio and everybody. But Endgame is being re-released with added footage, and when I first saw this, I wasn't thinking, God, how dated of a reference is that, Carlos Mencia? I don't even know where that came from, but apologies for that, just, silly me. Being re-released with new footage. And when I first saw this, I wasn't thinking that, Avatar probably did the same thing. But, as much as I love the friendly competition, it looked like kind of a cheap shot to me. It's like, okay, so we're going to add new footage just 2 months after the movie came out and just push that last couple $100 million, right? Just inch it over there. But I think people forget, and first of all, so I've been corrected in that Avatar did the same thing. Now, they did it a year later, but the numbers still count towards its cinematic gross, so, all's fair in Ferngully and Endgame, right? but anyway, I think the thing that people forget, it's really easy to be cynical about stuff after the fact. I mean, this has happened with 2 big James Cameron movies. We got really cynical about Titanic for being, they sold it as this big epic action movie and that stuff's there and Cameron's great at it, but the movie is just, kind of a silly derivative love story. And same thing with Avatar, it's big sci-fi, but it's the kind of big sci-fi that by that point, crowds were going to eat up. It was very simple, very familiar story. We all call it Ferngully, for example. So it had mass appeal, but, what we're forgetting is at the time, they weren't sure things. We can look back at the summer of all these big blockbusters, especially with the MCU, which I'll get to my point on that in a minute, but, the time of Titanic was prior to the time of Lord of the Rings, right? A 3-hour, action romance set on the Titanic was not necessarily a sure thing. And James Cameron, what did he make before that? He made True Lies, right? True Lies was awesome, but that was a bunch of years back, right? This was not a sure thing. And Titanic was a big deal. Like, it was like a thing you had to be there for. People were going back. People were bringing their families. I think I saw it in the theaters 3 or 4 times. And I will still hold that I think it's a pretty good movie. But I go back to that. Cameron always is trying to push the envelope. The guy, for how much of a jerk he's been in the news right now, and he has been, in regards to Wonder Woman a couple of years back and other things. The man, he's always trying to push the envelope technologically. And so, with Titanic, he invested a ton of his own money and his own, ideas into, I want to make this, big, never before done. I mean, there weren't too many movies before that that were using a ton of green screen and, smaller scale sets, and then he also had the giant sets. But this movie was pushing the envelope with technology for making films. And so, of course, to get a studio to buy into a big epic like that, you have to give them something that could be a sure bet. And the sure bet is this very relatable love story with, Leonardo DiCaprio, who was still in his pretty boy phase. He put people in seats, with a lot of the stuff he was in, and so that's the movie that they're selling. And Avatar was the same deal. Avatar was, we roll our eyes about 3D films, and I hate going to 3D films now. I avoid it. But find another one that was as amazing to watch for the 3D spectacle of it as Avatar. He had that shit dialed in, That was a hell of a ride. Now, at the end of the day, the movie is just a big roller coaster ride with a very derivative sci-fi plot. But that was another event film. Everybody showed up for it. It didn't make $2.7 billion because nobody liked it. This isn't a Michael Bay film, right? There's a lot more going on there. Now, is it a great film? No. Do I like it? Yes, I do. Has it held up all that well? Not so much. But there's something about the 3D, thing going on. So, yeah, the MCU have all been home runs, okay? And the MCU are now the thing that we're getting cynical about, right? Endgame was awesome. Almost everybody loved it. But the superhero fatigue thing is what everybody's talking about now. But transfer us back to the time of Avatar. There wasn't 1,000 of these friggin' movies in the theater. This was kind of during the beginning. When did this movie come out? The early 2000s? Early 2010s? Maybe it was 2011, 2013. I forget off the top of my head. But the MCU's been a thing for 11 years. So this was at the beginning of it. For a movie to make $2.7 billion when the other big box office draws were only making $800 or $900 million, and those were still some of the biggest movies of the year, this was a huge deal. So for us to all of a sudden be, Endgame has to take down Avatar. Yeah, of course, I'm on the same thing. I wanted Star Wars The Force Awakens to take down Avatar. I think the friendly competition thing is awesome, and I think everybody should strive to do better than the thing before it. But to say that we should erase Avatar because it's a non-issue, because it was a bad movie, cynically looking back, and no one thinks about it anymore, sure, you're probably right, but there's still an exhibit at Disney World all about Avatar that they were willing to invest a ton of money in, and it's not even one of their properties. And people show up and think the lines are like hours, multiple hours long to do this Avatar stuff, right? And so I think we're discrediting what Avatar really was as far as an event, as far as a success, looking at it through the hindsight of cynical eyes. And they're the same cynical eyes that are starting to look at the MCU. But what is Marvel and Disney doing with the MCU? They're not... Okay, so Infinity War and Endgame may have been a bit of a gamble because they're weird films. But they're a gamble that comes with surefire box office numbers to back it up. They knew that even if this movie was a so-so hit, even if the thing only made $1 billion, or $1.2 billion, I think, which is less than half of what it's actually made, $1.2 billion is what the lesser, and I'm talking lesser in the eyes of the cynical people because I thought it was great, but like that's what like Captain Marvel, which is considered like not as big of a movie as Endgame, and I agree it's more of a small character-driven story, but that movie made over $1.2 billion, so they kind of had a sure thing to go on to bet on. So Endgame kind of had at least the statistical numbers behind it to be a big deal. So for us to think that all of a sudden, you know, it's the underdog to take out Avatar. No, Avatar was the underdog the whole time. Avatar came out of nowhere and did 3 times the money that normal summer blockbusters were doing at the time. And this is something that we don't think about. So, again, I stand 100% behind now. Rah, rah, all's fair. Let's get up there. Let's take down friggin' Avatar, because Endgame has the accolades and it needs those. But Endgame's going to be remembered no matter what. So remember, just because Endgame doesn't end up hitting Avatar, if it doesn't hit it, it doesn't make it any less of a success, because I agree, we're probably going to be talking about Endgame a lot longer. But these Marvel movies are also not, you know, all coming out of nowhere left field. They're making them for the fans. They're doing the same thing that Cameron did with Titanic and the same thing that he did with Avatar by getting people in on something familiar and then working something new and strange into it, and hopefully people will latch on and carry through. It's the same idea, maybe done more successfully because we agree that the movies are better or more appealing to both the longtime fans and the universal crowd. But at the end of the day, Avatar was an original property. Again, it was ripping off a lot of things, but for a movie that comes out of nowhere, technically, I mean, it's James Cameron and all that, but, you know, that's a pretty big deal, so we can't forget that. So, cheers to Endgame. I hope it does take over Avatar, but let's not forget about how important the success of Avatar was at the time. That's about that. This has been the Chippa. I'll see you guys on the other side.